Good evening, everyone. I believe the recording is now on. I'm going to call I believe we have a quorum, and I'm going to call a meeting of the Concord Fin Com to order and remind everyone that we are being recorded and broadcast. So, make sure if you want to speak that your mic has the green light on. There are instructions on your microphone for how to, this is important for those who are listening at home. They need to be able to hear what we're saying, even if we can hear each other in the room. Okay, I don't believe we have any, the first order of business is minutes as available. I don't believe we have any minutes this week. Oh, we have a guy, oh no, yep, we do not. So we're gonna move on to item number 2, which is our calendar review. We have a draft that I want to skip over and move to the one that says school committee calendar. That's really not the school committee calendar, that's our calendar. It says events. So it's like 3 pages in. It's just a different format. It was something I was able to print from my computer. So it's just a slightly different format. I am proposing that we have a joint meeting with Carlisle to discuss our shared responsibility around the district. We have had this on our calendar for years, but I can't remember the last time this occurred. I don't remember it occurring in my tenure on this. It never has. I'm not sure how large and chaotic a meeting we want to have, the whole FinCom, or maybe the chair, vice chairs of the various committees get together, because we also would like to bring in the select board and have the select boards be part of that as well. So I'm considering just having that constrained to myself and Mary, along with the chair and the vice chair of the select board. And maybe we'll have like 8 people there, because I think the school committee would be advised that they should probably participate, given that that's the shared responsibility that both towns are facing. I think the other thing that will come, that we can generally discuss is what sorts of financial pressures each of the towns are perceived to be under, so that we can really understand how we're each managing our own budgets. That seems to be something that would help us guide our responsibility around the district. So that's proposed for the 19th. I have not yet reached out, because I just wanted to just bring it up to your attention and say it would likely just be myself and Mary meeting, and then inviting in chairs of the select boards.
Dean, it would be a public meeting, right?
It would be a public meeting,
So
and you could observe.
yes,
You could observe. Anyone can certainly come, and comments would be entertained. I'm sure that would be fine. Yep. So that's on September 19th. The event that I did not list here, and this is my oversight, is Carrie runs a training session in August. Carrie, can you just advise us when you would like to be doing that? What's that scheduled to be? It's listed as August 1st orientation. That's Thursday, August 1st?
It is, and I had mentioned that I have a potential conflict that evening.
Right.
So I was looking to see if there was an alternate date, but if there's not,
We
then
can
I'll make
discuss it.
that work.
We can discuss it. I don't have a problem with moving it. Would moving it a week be helpful to you?
What would you prefer?
It's mostly our new members, and this is extremely helpful. It guides us. It guides you through what are the policies that the town's budgeting process operates under, and a lot of very helpful introductory information regarding our process as well, our guideline process, et cetera. So
Unfortunately, Thursdays in August are not particularly good until the end.
Okay.
But again, if we can't find a date, then I'll make one of
Given
those
it's a training session, I don't think that Thursday is necessarily a huge problem.
That could be a problem.
Depends on how many.
So I guess it just depends on who may be interested in attending, what would work.
would say the following, say Wednesday work, like the first is a Thursday, and you're saying that's not good, would anything, I think anything, if we start to get too deep into August,
Yeah.
a lot of people have last bits of August that they usually take, so,
What about the 7th?
That's fine with me.
anybody, 7th sound like that could work?
When?
August 7th?
Yes, 7 PM.
That's all right. I can't make it, but that's all right.
You can't make it? You want to keep trying? Let's keep trying.
What?
You want to try for
trying.
something
Let's
else if
keep
you can't
trying.
make it?
Okay, let's-
It's gonna be hard to probably.
When can
Who's
you
gonna
make it?
go?
I'd like to go, but I can't make that on the 7th.
Oh, then two new,
You cannot make it on the 7th, Parshar? You four are probably the most important to try to meet this.
Yeah, I'm not from the whole. Next week?
I could do Tuesday night, the 6th, Monday night, the 5th. I can do that, those two.
Parashar, can you do that?
I'm out the whole
No,
week.
Okay, so you were in the week of the 12th, if we want you to be the week of the 11th, right?
Well, does
Don't
August,
hold it up just for a moment.
does August 1st work for everybody else? Okay,
What
then
time
why
did
don't
you
we,
start?
it's typically been at 7 PM.
Maybe you could video it and
No.
we can watch the video.
I can't remember, Carrie, does this constitute a public, is this just for the FinCom and it's not a public session that has to be recorded and whatnot? Or is this just a training session for, I can't remember.
I think it's posted, I don't know.
It is posted, it's a public meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
We have not typically broadcast
Right.
the meeting. There isn't any reason why it can't be broadcast, but we have not typically done that.
So Carrie, can you do the 1st of August?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
okay.
will, if that works for everybody, then I'll
Great,
just move
thank you.
some.
So now we're on a date that absolutely does not work for me.
Oh,
It's okay. I don't know what's going on. It's okay. That absolutely does not work for me,
Carrie,
so.
will it be here?
Likely, I'll have to.
These are the important people, and
Okay.
if, so if
It's a
they,
good
it works for
refresher,
them.
though.
Yeah, it's excellent for anybody
it's a
to
good.
attend.
it's
It's
a
really good.
It's a good thing to go to.
Okay.
Have to come and be here.
Yeah. So, okay, so let's go through the rest of the fall. We have a very full set of meetings. If the 19th is plugged in, then we have the 26th, which is just a regular, that's our regular FinCom meeting on the 26th. October 3rd, we're going to have the Minuteman Tech High School folks come in and talk to us as a guidelines meeting. October 10th, we're going to have the town budget. Carrie will come and present, or the town manager will come and present. Well, the town manager's on staff by 10th of August. When is the new town manager start? 12th. So he'll be there. Okay, so here's where the bump in the road sort of occurs. Mary and I sat down with the chairs of the school committee and the superintendent to try to work through their budgeting process. Because they do a bottom-up style budgeting, now it's zero-based, and they go to their principals and their department heads and say, build us a budget, hand it in, we'll review, et cetera. That can't get started until September. And by the time they're actually reviewing what those folks have handed in and then, getting into the position to approve it, it's late October. And that's a conflict with us. So what I have done here is said, we're just going to have a regular FinCom meeting on the 17th just to cover that month's FinCom business. Whether we have any particular FinCom business to take care of, that will be the 17th. And then on the 24th, this can work for them, the school, because the school will not have their built-up preliminary budgets from their, all approved from their principals and department heads yet by the 17th. So they're going to come in on the 24th, and they think that works for them. They also don't have a school committee meeting until the 22nd. They have one on the 1st of October, and then they have one on the 22nd of October. So they have no committee meetings that would be in the middle there. So we're going to meet them on the 24th. But at the end of the discussion with the schools, what we'd like to do is close the regular guideline meeting, and then, we'll vote a preliminary guideline from the guidelines group, close the guideline meeting, and then have the FinCom rubber stamp the, we have, the FinCom itself has to approve the recommendation of the guideline subcommittee. So it's sort of a tautology, but, we have to do it. So there's 2 meetings there listed on the 24th. But it does mean we do have to have a deliberation after we excuse the school committee from the room. And we will have, it's going to be a little longer meeting because of that, because they'll do their presentation and then we will deliberate on a preliminary guideline. So it's not optimal. Let me just say that. And then we go into our second round of guidelines presentations, November 7th for the town. And then once again, the schools say we can't get there on the 21st. We cannot, I'm on 14th, it's too fast. We can't be there. So we're going to have our regular monthly meeting. If we have any FinCom business, we'll conduct it. It could be a very brief meeting in November, on November 14th. And then November 21st, they'll be in to present their budgets, in a more final form. They will have a process that they're going to go through. They have to do a hearing in the first week of December, and then they have to approve their budgets in the first or second week of December. What I did, because it's too much for us to deliberate, and this thing we're doing on the 24th, I don't want to do that again. I want us to have a chance to just digest all the different things we've heard. So we're going to be voting our final guideline on the 5th of December. Now, just to be clear, I have told Carmen Reese, our overseer and appointer, whatever that is, the person in charge of us, that this is what we intend to do. And a lot of it has to do with the scheduling that the school committee can make. Our alternative would be to meet during Thanksgiving week. I just think that's a challenge. So I pushed it out to December 5th. This is a violation of the bylaw. We are supposed to get the guideline closed out by November 30th. So there we are. I think if the school continues to use this budgeting process, we're going to have a long-term problem. We had a problem with this scheduling last year. We can survive this year because the warrant closes on January 10th, which is substantially later than usual. Usually it's the 2nd or the 3rd of January or something like that. It's closing on the 10th of January, and then the town meeting is way late in April. So the whole schedule is shifted out. So this week I don't think is a terrible incursion on that process. But as a long-term thing, this is going to be an annual challenge to get the school committee and have us be able to issue our guideline by the end of November because of the way they do their budgeting now.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So that basically presents the question of, should we be thinking about trying to modify the bylaw itself as a point of
It's
necessity?
it's an option. I would love it if there would be a way for the school committee and the superintendent to just start their process like 1 week earlier, and then the stuff would dovetail a little better, I think. It just seems like we're now, just to give them, the benefit of the doubt, their budget year starts in July, but they're not up and running. They don't have any experience with how their budgets are working until the kids actually come back to school, and that's in September, and we're right in the thick of it. So for them, it's always a challenge, and they will always want to be the last people we interview. And so this year, we're going to push out to December 5th, but I really do think that this is going to be a problem long-term. Yeah.
So they probably could give us their budget for staffing, and that's like 75 or 80% of their total budget.
Yeah.
And if we had that ahead of time, then the rest that comes in that's just the I don't want to say discretionary, but
Yeah.
it's not the bulk of their budget. Right?
Right.
They know what their staffing's gonna be.
So the other question I have is, how much do they actually change from the first meeting to the second meeting after we give them that?
It changes.
It does change. Yeah, they go back and sharpen their pencils.
Yes, it goes down.
You know, it does change. So there's, you know, they hear what we have to say on the preliminary guideline, and they go, oh, they mean business, or that, you know, this is serious, or something. And so they do make changes. It's-
A different question, in the guidelines, the draft guidelines letter, there's the request to the town about would they be interested in zero-based budgeting? So if in fact they decided yes, then, you know, they're another
Right.
entity, so
Exactly.
how, you know, it might be irrelevant, maybe a bylaw change would have to happen?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
need to get, December is, you know, it's not, everybody's busy. It's hard to keep pushing out into December, that's all. So I'm just saying this year, maybe this is a one-off, but it feels to me, we're 2 years into the zero-based process. It feels to me like we're in a pattern that's going to cause this trouble for us, you know, going forward. That's all.
There's no legal consequences to missing the deadline, right?
Not that I'm aware of, but you know, I've done everything I need to do. I've eluded our appointing authority. I'm doing what I can to just say, look, this is what it is.
Political pressure is tremendous.
Everybody waits with bated breath on November 30th. You know,
They'll start paying attention.
they have watch parties. They're waiting for the guideline. So
We wish.
I think you did a great job with the calendar. I move that we accept this calendar.
I need a second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the calendar, including August 1st for, yes. It's unanimous.
Great.
Okay, very good. Next item on the agenda. And just so you're clear, in the packet, we're not really having a big discussion about it, but just for your information, our spring meetings, which are hearings, et cetera, are scheduled here. And they were voted by the select board for the lead up to the town meeting. Now, one thing that is not on the calendar we just approved, but I would like to see in the spring cycle is a hearing for our sustainability, you know, our concept of sustainability. Now, we can talk about that under fiscal sustainability goals and process. But I think that given the tightness of the things that we are doing in the fall, it makes sense for us to sort of put that out in the spring someplace, you know, try to hold a hearing in the spring. We got a lot of meetings and we're busy and we're observing things. So it's a lot of work all right, so the guideline letters, I'm going to let Mary drive this.
Is that in spring before town meeting or after town meeting?
No, I'm sorry, that's kind of winter, you know, early spring. It's somewhere in this lead up where we're holding hearings and everything else. You know, we'll get down to business and hold a hearing on our sustainability goals. So the letters.
Okay, the letters. We have to get the guideline letters out to the three large budgeting entities. That would be the town, the Concord Public Schools, and the regional high school by next Wednesday, July 31st. So what you have in front of you here is the latest version. This is different from what you received last month in that there's some introductory verbiage and some of the topics have been rearranged and consolidated. So they're here for your review. I got some feedback from people as things to include. I've included everything except, Phil, you had asked me to include in the letter to the Concord Carlisle Regional High School, a request to the school committee to ask if they're doing anything about splitting costs between Concord and Carlisle.
Yes.
So I did not include that, and I'm wondering if you want to discuss that.
I would like to discuss that.
Okay, go ahead.
Otherwise, I think these are great because they're nice and concise, and I think it'll be easier for the schools and the town to answer these questions and give us helpful information, and easier for us to digest. So I think you did a great job of reducing the length of these.
Thank you.
No, the only thing is that I actually think we ought to ask the formal question of the schools, the school, regional school committee. What are they doing to make sure that Carlisle pays its fair share towards the cost of running the district? And we've asked that question, and they've evaded it for several years. And part of the evasion was, oh, we didn't know it was in our ballpark. I thought it was in the town's ballpark. They were putting together a list of costs. But they always come up with a reason not to answer the question. So I think we should at least ask formally so that they're finally, we don't get the excuse we didn't know we had to answer that question. So I tried to ask it in a nice way. What I wrote here, and I don't know what I gave you before, but what are you doing to make sure that Carlisle contributes its fair share to the costs of the district? I don't think we're asking anything controversial.
Okay, we can go around and comment. The reason I did not include that is because my thinking, and I also spoke with Dean about this, is my thinking was that we are having a joint meeting with the Carlisle Select Board members, FinCom, and the school committee members, and I'm hoping that at that meeting, we can foster a cooperative relationship where we're looking at the total spending, and I'm worried that if we start looking at specific items and trying to split them between the two, we'll be distracted from our common goal, which is to, again, look at total spending and put forward a common voice to the school committees that we want spending to be kept within line. So that was my thinking. And then Dean also had some other comments about when we look at some of the specifics in the past as far as, like Beatty Center or other things, there's usually a good reason why we're not charging them specific dollars. For example, the Beatty Center was built on land that Concord Carlisle owned jointly.
Contributed, but
But anyway, so the point is
by a
that for
joint,
each one, there's
intermunicipal agreement.
The big
there's a
thing.
tit for tat, and I'm worried, again, that will distract us from a broader conversation, which is how do we, provide excellent service at a reasonable cost? And so I'm trying to foster a cooperative relationship with them, and I'm worried that this would maybe distract us from that.
So
That's my feeling.
The big cost that I think of is the $4 million that we had to pay to rebuild the bus depot after the school committee tore it down. And frankly, the person who was in charge of the school committee at that time was from Carlisle, and Carlisle always encouraged the regional school district not to support the busing, and the town was opposite. So we got that $4 million cost. There's 10 or so other categories of cost, but that's something. Even there were promises made at town meeting and at this FinCom meeting that Carlisle would pay its fair share for the bus depot by rent or some other reimbursement mechanism, and that's not being done.
So Phil, how about we try to foster some sort of go forward recognition that when Concord is being asked to provide a service, that the district annotate this service is being provided by the town of Concord, and they somehow enumerate it and they put it somehow in the works that it will be accounted for. To try to, I completely understand what you're saying about the bus depot. There was a lot of bad blood going on because of that thing.
It's not just
all
the bus
through the
depot.
town.
There are many, and it's when there have been a lot of promises made when things like that are done, and then they're not followed through. We tore out the old school parking lot when we were told that the schools had more parking than they did at the old school, and now this year they come and say, well, we need another $1 million for a parking lot. I don't think we can keep on just relying on everybody's promise. We got to put something in there.
I'm curious, rather than sort of Concord versus Carlisle question, maybe we sort of take the person, sort of depersonalize and just ask the committee to work with the selectmen of both towns to basically come up with a little bit of a report and set of recommendations so that in the moving forward, spending is done in a fair and equitable way. And leave it at that, rather than sort of pitting it into Concord versus Carlisle.
Right, I mean, it
It's
is,
just,
It's not Concord versus Carlisle. It's expenses that we pay. We pay much more than our fair share. And if promises were made.
Okay, I've got to ask a really.
If you build this bus depot, we're going to charge Carlisle for it. Promises are made about other things. And so, we could get into a different philosophical discussion is what are the Carlisle people even doing at Concord school committee meetings? It influences that. And I've got lots of friends in Carlisle. It's nothing against Carlisle. It's just fair share. And so Carlisle is able to spend more on their school because they don't have to spend as much on the regional school district.
I have to ask a stupid question. I really do. When we allocate some of the money back to Carlisle based on student populations, on historical student populations, aren't they paying their fair share based on the number of students?
that's
They're-
absolutely true based on the
they're-
school budget. But
so-
what I think Phil is,
So they should be paying more.
yeah, but what Phil's referring to
No, it's not
are
paying more.
are municipal services
Yep.
that end up becoming Concord's,
Oh, this is a okay.
things that the municipality does because that is cited here in Concord.
I'll
And-
give you another
Okay,
example.
I see what you're saying.
So there are umpteen examples, but I'm pretty sure that we waived the permit for the school, the high school.
Yes, or it was $100,000, it was $100,000.
Wait.
Right, yeah,
But it
that
was
was-
100,000, okay.
as opposed to millions.
It should have been $1 million.
It should have been millions, right?
But so
Yeah,
that
exactly.
was a favor to the regional school district.
Yes.
We also, basically,
Okay.
the Concord Public Works does all the functional engineering for the high school. We provide a police officer.
but who makes that decision to waive the fees or provide the
The
police
school,
officer?
the
Town
school
manager.
district. Well, the school district asked the town manager to waive the fees.
We have to look at ourselves in the mirror then. I mean,
Yeah.
if it's a town manager.
I know.
I don't know how you.
Well,
put it on
I know.
Carlisle. That's what.
Well,
So,
it's because the school district asked for it. And the school district is not looking out for our interests. I'll give you an example. Lincoln, which is part of the Minuteman Regional School, charged the Minuteman Regional School District $1 million for their building permit. They do that. That's what towns do. That's how they make some of the money back for these things.
well, it takes a lot
So
of
I'm just
time
saying that,
to vet a building, So,
I'm
to inspect it.
frankly surprised that we have a problem with just asking the question. They can always say, we prefer to let Carlisle, work it out informally or something, but I think we ought to ask the question.
Okay.
We owe it to the town after all these promises and all these costs that we've been providing.
So can you read your wording again,
you
Phil?
word
So we
something?
can,
So I move that we approve the guidelines letter with this amendment. Add a question on the sharing of costs with Carlisle. What are you doing to make sure that Carlisle contributes its fair share to the cost of the district?
I think
don't
that's
like
kind of
the
loaded.
tone. Yeah,
Fair
the
share,
tone
it seems
is-
like a
the tone
loaded
is-
thing.
yeah.
I guess if it's the town manager making the decision, just because I ask, doesn't mean they have to say yes. So shouldn't the question go to the town manager?
Yeah, we should ask.
We have put it in past years, we put it to the
That's
town
just the
manager.
building permit. That was just
No,
the
but on
building
the whole
permit.
thing, I mean.
No, but the
if
town manager has to
something
respond
else-
to the officer who's on staff. He's
Well,
responded
that's-
to that as well.
That, if
know,
we're
'cause the
worried about
police-
municipal services being spent for the schools, then I think I agree with you that it should be in the letter to the town manager,
Fine, put it
maybe.
in the letter to the town manager too. But then he'll say, in the past, they've said, okay, here are the expenses. Now I'm giving it to the school. And the school said, well, we didn't know we had to answer the question. So there should be rent for the bus depot. There should be sharing of other costs like the engineering. And there was a whole list, about 10 or 20 categories last year.
So Phil, maybe I agree with you, by the way, right? So maybe another way to structure this is ask the question of the town manager, but then on the school committee side, ask them, geez, what municipal service, and ask maybe both of them, what municipal services
do you receive?
are you receiving, and
From
which ones do you
Concord.
expect to provide, and what are you charging, right? So something
What-
like
what-
that.
We already had that. We had that last year.
Yeah,
And they didn't give an answer?
those.
No, because
Yeah,
they
we had
were,
detailed
they were kicking the
reports.
ball back and forth between the two of them. The town manager said, here are the services, and then the,
Services plus the dollars we're gonna charge?
so then I asked a question at one of these meetings, what are you doing about it? We'll address it. And then the next meeting, the school superintendent came back and says, oh, we didn't know we had to address it. We thought the town manager still had the ball in his court. So we never got an answer. That's why I want to put it in this guideline.
So how about in the guideline letter, we say, the FinCom would appreciate a responsive budgeting strategy toward this document that we have on file, the one from the town manager regarding municipal services that the district is, using. And see if they come back with some strategy for how to account for them.
That's a good idea.
And I'll just ask them
That's a good idea.
to provide us with a strategy for how to account for the municipal services that the district is consuming.
So maybe this might address another
Yeah, that's
thought
fine.
I
Just
had.
have a question that gets us an answer, whether
Yeah.
it's the way I worded it, or the way you worded it.
So why do we have three separate letters? And the reason I'm raising this is, it looks, just like a lot of towns, we feel like everybody's in their silos in the school.
They are.
Because
they are.
That might also help answer this question, is we have one letter that's basically addressed to all three. And then you've got some joint things, we want you jointly to come up with some things, and then here are the independent questions for all of you. So in essence, you're showing everybody what you're asking everybody, and it's going to one team versus three different entities. I just throw that out there. It's a radical idea.
It's just that these are three completely distinct budgeting processes. I think you really need to
And
be.
they're approved at via different warrants at town meetings,
I
so
get all
they're,
that, but the letter can set up the framework, so it's a conversation where you.
Well, I think that we could craft it. We can craft the three letters so that they have parallel questions. And
Well, they
so-
generally, there are a lot
I
of
think you're talking about
overlapping
a parallel
questions. but-
conversation, though, right?
I'm just saying, one letter to go through, and here's your section, here's the comment sections.
Oh,
Just
yeah, is it are you saying the letter should be the
one
same?
letter to all three entities of people that you have there, right?
Right?
Say boom, 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 and then you've got a letter that says, hey, there are some areas of common interest, boom, come up with a joint strategy, some information, and then see section 2 from the school piece, section 3 for the town piece.
So,
So it's one letter, and everybody knows.
but I just want to ask a question. When you say
Not a
there's
bad
a
idea
joint,
for the future.
there is no joint.
Well, for this
That's what
one,
I'm,
we're
if
asking.
I understand you correctly, like they don't
I
collaborate.
understand that, but we're
So-
trying to get them to collaborate a little bit.
I think the three entities don't collaborate.
They don't.
That's
They
the
don't.
point.
They don't.
I understand they don't.
They
They,
don't.
they build their budgets independently. The schools have their priorities and the things that services they provide, and they need to budget for those. And the town is entirely, distinct.
If you're interested in pursuing collaboration between the three spending, then what we really should be doing is you should be going to the select board meetings and talking about the long-range planning committee, which is trying to do exactly that, trying to get the three big spenders into the room and talk about what are their needs, prioritize, time them. So that's where it's happening right now, right? So that's so if you're
Correctly, Phil said they were sort of pointing fingers at each other.
on this particular
On this
point,
particular one.
on this particular
If you have
point.
one letter, it goes to all three.
Yep.
There's at least one topic where if you put it on both of them together, it's hard for them to point the finger at each other.
No, I agree. I tend to agree with the spirit of what you're saying. I tend to agree with, and as a follow-on question, if I can ask a question. Sure. So, with respect to the town, I like the letters too. By the way, so thank you for putting in the work on that. The FY20 one of the things that I was interested in understanding is why was there differentiation between the two schools and the question for the town. We're asking for FY19, FY20 expenditures and relative versus FY20 budget performance. And I was just I'd like to know that for the town as well, especially with a 2-year look back, which would be really interesting.
I didn't even catch that, so. That was not deliberate.
So my
That's-
motion is amended to add that additional question.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to have Dean, accept Dean's wording of the question for the sharing of costs, or sharing of budgeting, however you want to say it.
This is what I tried to capture. What is your strategy to account for the municipal services that are being delivered to the regional high school?
Right, by the town of Concord, you could say, by the town of Concord.
And this would be in
What do you mean then, but how are they going to respond to that when you say, what's your strategy? Do you want?
Yeah, well, you could call it, what do you, we could say instead of strategy, what is your budget, what is your budgeting, what is your budgetary approach, budgetary approach to accounting for these services? That would, think that would be.
And then, actually, it would be good if you asked the question to both the schools and to the town, and ask them also to delineate what the categories of expenses are. Ask them to delineate it, because they should be the same, right?
Well, we went through that
Well, no,
exercise
no,
last
like-
year, we just got lists.
Right,
And
we
the
did
lists
get a list.
were pretty
If
much
they
the same.
just regurgitate the list, that would be,
Well, but the lists just were hand waved, like, here's what it is, we're not really doing anything about this. So we're trying to encourage them to,
you could start with just finding out what they think their baseline is, or what they think that they're spending right now.
Right.
The list.
yes.
So I agree with Dean's comment. I agree with that. And just so everybody feels good about this, I do remember the schools coming and saying, we're going to address that in a future meeting.
okay.
And so it's not like they completely resist doing this, but I think we just got to put it in them formally, so it's in here and they have to confront it. Because I just don't want them to come in and say again, oh yeah, we'll do that in a future meeting.
Yeah, what, the one place where there's a real ongoing expense is the resource officer, and the police chief is very reluctant to let that become some sort of weird shared expense. Now, he still has his line of command or whatever, and that person works for him in a direct way. But if there's some money that flows into the town that helps fund the role, that doesn't matter.
The way this works is, so Carlisle pays 25% of the regional budget.
Right.
And the way the schools work is they generally split the expenses 60% to town of Concord, 40% to the region. So if Carlisle has to pay a share, it's going to be 25% of 40%, so it's 10%. So it's not like this is a huge expense, but it's a fairness thing.
Yeah.
So if you add the cost of the school resource officer, this town could just bill the schools for it. Concord would still pay 60% of that cost.
It's going to
Or
come back to it.
75% of that cost.
Yeah, it's just going to
So-
get allocated back.
Yeah, so it's not like we're asking a lot, it's just a fairness thing.
Yeah, that's fine. And we do have a new town manager. Some of the resistance was that
That's
the
right.
town manager was reluctant, and we have a new town manager. And if we express some interest in that, there might be a breath of fresh air. We'll see.
I guess my question would be the resource people. There's going to be one in the middle school and then
Right.
one in the high school, or there already is one in the high school and the one we wrote in on is in the middle school. Now, does that person also is that person also a resource to any other school in our town?
The resource officer that's assigned to the high school is a full-time person for that, with the police chief having mentioned that he may need to be pulled for other priorities. So the chief needs to have him like be on staff and not be like, hey, I work for these people. He needs to be able to pull them when he needs them.
Cynthia's
Have I got that right, Cynthia?
Absolutely right.
Okay.
Yeah. So my concern would be, how do you then start saying, we want Concord Academy, or we want Carlisle, or we want another school to also contribute to the resource person, when we really don't know what percent time would be involved? How do you then?
I don't think we're going to get to that level of granularity.
I
You know,
know,
I
but
really think we're talking about the big ticket items, like maybe the bus depot, or avoid things like
Well, the
that.
resource person just came up,
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I know
Yeah.
what you mean.
It's
I know.
it's an
No, but
ongoing
it's a good
expense.
question. It's a
It
good
would
question.
be-
It's just
it would be
that,
insignificant. A resource person probably costs $150,000 a year, so 25% of that's $37,000.
Yeah.
and you said 10% is what we
No, 10% for the big municipal services, but the resource officer just goes to the high school.
Cool.
Oh,
Right,
okay.
Yeah.
And there's a separate resource officer that
To the
Carlisle
middle-
wouldn't
to-
contribute
right.
to at all for the
Middle school, right. So we are going to add this question,
This is, okay.
and we have a motion on the table which has an amendment from Brian.
And one from D,
question? Yeah, sure.
which
Absolutely.
was to add it to the town question, too.
Both the town and the school.
So Brian was.
Just one last question. With respect to the collective bargaining question for the schools,
Yes.
I'm wondering if we should, because the collective bargaining and the labor cost is,
Yes.
primary driver for the schools.
Yep.
What would be interesting to know explicitly from them, just as an expectation, is to really kind of have, perhaps insert the language that's in the FY19, FY20, which is significant variances relative to the budget for the previous 2 years, so we can kind of understand what the track record is. Now, maybe it's just very consistent and steady Eddie year on year on year, but I don't fully understand or know that. So, just a suggestion.
How about when we're talking about the expenditures relative to budget, if I ask them to focus on labor costs?
That's fine too.
You know what I mean? Instead of under
Sure.
the collective bargaining?
Right.
because
I just want to make sure they don't gloss, and I don't think they would. I don't think they would gloss.
But you
over
wanna
this, but
focus- right.
I just feel like we need to have a robust sort of discussion, and I think it would be great if they just understood. Like, we really need to make sure that FinCom fully understands how this
it's
process
trending.
works, and it's trending.
Okay.
That would be
Yeah,
great.
I think if I put that in the topic right above that and say focus on labor costs,
That would
that'll
be
give
great.
you the history.
That'd be
Okay.
great.
I have a couple of questions. This goes to capital assets, when we talk about discuss your 5-year capital plan.
Yep.
Are we going to ask them about their projections for 10 years? Are we trying to expand it so we have a better understanding for a 10-year, over the 10 years? And I'm not talking about the long-term, large capital gain projects like out of school. I'm just talking about a 5 and 10-year plan. Is that-
I think five
is
is,
that
I think that
appropriate?
5 is really what we can reasonably predict, I think. 10 is, there's been some discussion at the select board about forming the long-range thing, and Terry Ackerman identified 3 layers of planning or capital planning. One would be planning that you do within your operating budget, and that could be, you might want to buy a school bus this year, and if you can do it within your operating budget, you buy a school bus. The second would require debt, and that debt could either be, it would be debt within the levy limit. And you want to buy 3 school buses, you may want to issue some debt, but you would keep that debt service within the levy limit. You're not going to ask for an exclusion vote. And then there's a third tier, which is excluded debt. I need a new building. I need something big, and I have to exclude it. The goal of this long range, or this what they want to do is have a 10-year window, is to look at that third layer where you're asking for excluded debt. You want to do something big, and it's going to require a townwide vote. I don't know that you want to work with a 10-year plan on, do I need a new school bus, this year, next year? 5 years of that is probably enough. I think that's sort of stretching it, maybe. I mean, that's just my opinion. I'm happy to entertain.
It just seems if you even had 5 to 10 years, getting them to think further along. Yes, we have a new high school, but 20 years from now or 10 years from now, what kind of more than routine maintenance is going to be required at that point in time?
Right.
How often do they put on a new roof? I don't know.
When
I
you
think for the
buy a
town-
car, they give you a maintenance list that goes
We have
out
that
10
for-
years.
I don't know. It was just a thought.
No, it's not, it's not Terry.
Well, how about this? If you were to say at the end of that clause, and list any other significant long-term capital expenses that you currently foresee or something like that.
That's a good, I like that. I like Phil's, it's a good.
My other one was on the town guidance letter, and it was about zero-based budgeting. And I'm wondering if this would, with having a new town manager and all, if this wouldn't be, rather than ask them to respond to
They all
that
look the same.
necessarily in the document, it's, I don't know, it's almost to the bottom of the front side of the page. the guidelines
Yep, I
page.
see it. Go ahead.
And it says zero-based budgeting. And you want to know their thoughts, as to feasibility of it. And I'm just wondering if maybe this would be an opportunity for the two of you to go and talk with Kate and our new town manager.
And
you know,
Carrie.
And have this.
Carrie.
And Carrie, yes. But
Carrie's-
talk to
Carrie
them
looks thrilled at the
about the idea
Importance.
of this.
Yes, no.
Rather than asking them to write about it in this, they could.
Actually,
after-
the point of this letter is really to get them to start thinking and to come and have a conversation with us. And they do give us written materials, but
Right.
during that conversation, I think
But
we
I think
can
you could
all
have-
express.
Well, I think you could have a conversation.
Ahead of time?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think it would just be.
Yeah.
um, Because you've already seen the value of it.
Exactly,
on
exactly.
the
I'm,
school
I'm,
budgeting side.
I'm completely with you that I think this is something that we would really want the town to implement. And any ideas we have to move that along would be great. I think this year might be not realistic.
We're gonna have the meeting on September, whatever it is,
19th.
The
19th.
19th.
So that's proposed.
But, this.
So we can definitely be bringing that up every time.
It's just.
Every time we see them, zero-based budgeting. No, seriously, I agree with you. I do. We will try to do everything we can to make that happen.
So Mary, just, go ahead, Harsha.
So on the benchmarking one,
Yes.
Good, that's where I was going.
yeah, so I would suggest sort of two things. One is just tweak the language, so please present, and rather than or any other reputable, what about just or other source to help understand?
Well, so in addition to that,
Then copy that language for the other two.
my question was, should we be specific with respect to which benchmarking metrics we're looking for?
So I'll tell you my feeling, right? When I read the original letters, and Mary and I had a conversation on this, a lot of it came down, as I was putting myself in the recipient's shoes, it was very prescriptive and very directive, almost like a parent talking to a child. And I thought, and you did a good job setting sort of giving general directions, and letting them kind of come back to us, giving them the freedom to sort of figure out what works and what doesn't and tell us. That's the only reason I would shy away from naming the source. We've got one there,
So you're saying take out the word reputable,
but.
'cause
or
that's
any other
condescending.
source, Or any other source.
Okay, or any other source,
Copy
or
that
any other,
language
got
to the
it,
other two.
got it.
So you don't think we want to be specific with respect to
No.
the benchmarking metrics that we're looking
No.
for?
Do we,
I don't, and let me tell you why. I just remember witnessing when we had the original meeting with the school committee 2 years ago, was that? When it was supposed to be a budget discussion and it turned into a benchmarking exercise. So I'm worried that we don't want to derail this budgeting conversation into a benchmarking conversation. So we're asking them, please bring benchmarking data if you can, if you think it would be helpful, but I don't want the focus in any way to shift from what are you going to spend next year, what do you think you're going to spend in the next 5 years? That's my main concern. I want to keep it focused on next year's spending requests, because that's what the work is in front of us. The work is to figure out what's the guideline and what are the priorities, and so that's why I,
And John, I think we should, when we see benchmarks, or we don't see them, we can ask them the question, but come forward with something, and then, we're not experts in all the fields that they have, they're the subject matter experts.
right.
so that was my feeling.
Well, so I think what they come back to us with and comparing it to peer groups is essential.
But if I
It
remember
needs,
correctly,
it's
they didn't-
essential context to understand where it stands
Well, the
relative.
question does
Anything-
ask for spending relative to peer communities.
Yes, but my question is, should it be more specific as to which metrics we're looking for?
I don't know that, we would need another meeting, John, to go through what we thought would be appropriate metrics for schools, for the towns. You know, we're not in a position 2 days from having to get this out the door.
ClearGov is pretty good too, don't you think?
No, well, they have a wide array of data. The question is, what John's trying to say is like, let's specify what we'd like to see.
Oh.
What the comparative columns of data would be. So I just don't know that we're in a position and let them chew on that.
So right now, we're giving them the choice to
Yeah.
either use ClearGov or any other database.
Oh, yeah. That's fine. But as I said, there's a lot of, ClearGov doesn't really give you a lot of direction. It just says, here's a pool of data. Give us some comparative information and you're on your own, which
ClearGov
John-
collects that from a bunch of different
Sure,
sources,
yeah.
Yes.
which are all, credible sources.
Oh, they're mass DOR sources and
I just want to make a comment.
The
We can-
DESI sources.
We can write whatever, it's good that we're doing this and we're thinking it through. The real work happens when they come in front of us and for us to remember what we asked and make sure that they actually answer the questions that we've asked. So that's,
By the way, this is a vast improvement over the past. We used to get the answer, we don't benchmark, we don't compare ourselves to other schools. No, that was what we got. So now we're at least asking.
so I'm going to make a motion that we approve, any other discussion? The letters as
Would you
written,
like combine the three or don't feel comfortable doing that?
I don't feel comfortable.
So we have a motion, and
I have a motion.
We had amendments from
I have a motion to approve the letters amendments.
and from D.
Exactly. So the three amendments I have are the one that Dean used to basically
my language, more or less,
articulate
on
what you were saying, and I've written, what is your budgetary approach to account for the municipal services that are being delivered to the regional high school by the town of Concord? That's one. The second one is Brian wants us to ask for trends in labor costs in the schools. Is that right? And then the third one is when we're talking about capital, we're going to add a sentence that says, and any other long-term capital needs you foresee. Okay?
And that would be in all of the letters. Same with the question about the municipal services. That would also go to
The town.
the town.
The town, right.
Yeah.
And, right, all three.
Well, it doesn't really go to the,
Doesn't go to CPS.
CPS.
They don't have
Okay,
shared
Okay,
service.
good. Town and the, okay, that's my motion.
So that's the motion that's currently on the table. Do I have a second for that motion? Yes.
All in favor?
Any further discussion? All in favor? Okay, Mary, you're on.
Great, okay, they go out next week.
Okay. Okay, what's next on our to-do list here? Process review. I have not done a lot of work on the 5-year tax projection. I need to do work on that, but what I would like to skip to is the one I skipped over last week, which was fiscal sustainability goals and process. Last year, we sidled up to a warrant article where we were going to, ask the town to approve a annual, or change our process so that we were bound, just the way we're bound by the November 30th date for issuing the guideline, to create a sustainability index, and that, we backed away from the table. We did not move that article, but we are still committed to some form of guardrail that we are trying to posit during the budgeting process. And we are not in a position at this point it's not in the guideline letters. It would have been ideal if we could have had some level of policy where we came to the guideline process and said, this is our sustainable tax growth rate that we want you to think about as you're doing your budgeting, and put it in these letters. But that will require us to create a process where we are very early in the game, like almost as soon as we leave town meeting, we are meeting and we are voting on the follow-up number so that these can be done by July. We have very few meetings. After town meeting, it's like, we can exhale. And so that's where everybody goes, okay, we'll just meet once a month and we'll get there. But we need to find a pattern that we can establish that will get us to the point where these letters, when they go out, say, this is the guideline, sustainable rate that we would like you to think about as you're building your budget. And we're not in a position to do that this year. These letters have to go out in the next week. I'd like to just open it up for conversation about how do we arrive at that kind of schedule? How do we get there, and what would that schedule look like? I'm committed to having a hearing this spring, either before town meeting or it can be after. If we come up with a process where we're committed to creating a sustainable growth rate number that we can get into these letters, we should have the hearing. We should have another follow-up meeting amongst ourselves. We should issue it, and it should then be part of our June, July discussion that is going into these letters. So it feels to me like we need something in the April, May timeframe where we're really, like, town meeting is over and the very next thing we're doing is working on a sustainable growth rate or something like that. Is that
I
schedule?
agree we need to do a hearing, but why wouldn't we do it before town meeting so that we could announce it at town meeting? And I understand there was some controversy about it this year because, we originally proposed it as an amendment to the bylaw. And people resist that. It's permanent. So we just announce it, as part of our brief minute that we get to make the presentation. And I would guess the moderator would let us do it. But if not, we could do it as part of one of our recommendations that we have met and decided the guideline for next year, which is this number, and it's the product of these things.
So if we announce that, if we use town meeting as the forum for that, we're really proactively saying, when everybody leaves the hall, use this number as your budgeting metric for building next year's budget.
Yeah.
It
also
I'm not sure how helpful that is, because these budgets that we'll be voting on in the hall that during that 2 or 3 day period will be, of a certain magnitude, which may or may not agree with the number that we're going to promote, and then we're saying, well, this is for next year. It just doesn't seem like the right time to say it. Yeah.
We'll see how close they
Yeah.
get.
So
So is it possible, I guess I'd like to know what you think the process is right now, so we could look at a timeline to see, can we actually have this available by the time we're setting the guidelines this year? We have until October.
the thing about this sort of rate that we've been discussing for 2 years now is that we would like to have this top of mind while the budgeting entities are doing their budgeting. We want it to be in their hands, so as they build their budgets, they go, this is what the FinCom thinks is a sustainable rate of growth. And we are trying to, whether they try to conform or at least are cognizant of it, it's showing some recognition that this is what the FinCom thinks.
No,
And that, I think, to me, feels like it needs to be in their hands in these letters. This is our effort to communicate to these 3 budgets. As you build these, consider this number. This is important.
Didn't we vote on
yeah,
how we were going to calculate the sustainable growth
we
rate?
did vote on
Vote
that.
on how we were going to, so we know the number. We haven't calculated it, but we know that number, right?
Yeah.
What's preventing us from putting that in the letter now?
Right.
Why can't we just say, according to the FinCom's definition of a sustainable growth rate defined as this, just as information only, here's the sustainable growth rate. Why can't we do that now?
We could, that we did vote that.
We did vote that.
We had, it was a motion that we all voted.
Yeah, it was the average of the 10-year treasury note
Right.
and
CPI.
6-month trailing CPI.
What happens when the yield curve is inverted? John, can you comment on
What
that?
happens? What happens when interest rates go negative?
Just what happens when the yield curve is inverted?
So-
So I think that's a great idea, Mary. I think we should highly consider. But
It's right in here. I know.
And I agree, Mary, because Peter Fischelis said that when he was on the school committee, he really would have appreciated some guidance going into collective bargaining.
Yep.
We missed that boat. That
Yeah.
boat sailed.
Yeah.
I thought that was done. Correct me if I'm wrong.
We have a one-year contract with the CTA.
But I thought you also had a secondary agreement that was like some memorandum of agreement, some MOA.
Now we're opening it up again, CCTA and CTA, same year.
Okay, I thought there were two agreements voted the night that the 1 year was voted. There was another agreement that was also voted.
But I don't believe the steps and lanes and all that is locked in.
Okay, well, all right,
So
that's,
you need to, yes, so I
Okay.
think it would be important to
okay.
point that out.
It's a
Can you
start.
just step up to a microphone, Cynthia, and just,
You tell us
just
what,
tell
what
us?
exactly has been negotiated?
That would be
I
helpful.
wasn't on the committee, I wasn't
What-
part of the negotiations,
Just
but I do
identify
know
yourself, so,
that,
for the
Cynthia Rainey,
television.
member of the school committee, not speaking for the school committee, but doing my best. So specifically, Dr. Hunter wanted, and the school committee wanted to line up the bargaining units. So now we're bargaining with both CCTA and CTA next year for 3-year contracts.
Okay, so, the initial 2.5% 1 year agreement was just a placeholder, and there's an
Yes.
agreement that we will negotiate with, in parallel with the
Correct.
other unions.
Thank
Because now
you.
they're on the same.
Thank you.
we were
That-
They're on the
level-
same scale, they've been
But the steps and
harmonized, the
lanes,
steps and
all
lanes
those
are all
things are-
harmonized, exactly, okay,
Good.
fair enough.
That
Thank you,
clears that
Cynthia.
up. I was wondering.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So, let's, back to our conversation about putting this in the letter.
Right, on page 3 of this document that had
Oh, that,
handout.
Yes, yes.
Okay?
yep,
On page 3, it talks, it says on 11/26/2018, the FinCom approved the following motion, and it was for the first time a numeric 5-year sustainable growth rate for the coming year. And it was calculated based on the arithmetic average of the inflation rate based on the most recent 12-month CPI for the region and a 10-year Treasury bill yield that existed on the first day of July when the market is open. So what was calculated was 2.95% per year.
that was
At one
last
point in
year.
time.
That would have
That was
been-
last-
so
yeah.
it
So
would-
we could calculate based on this July 1st.
Yep, this July 1st, and then whatever the arithmetic average of the inflation rate based on the 12.
I think Phil's doing it right now.
It's 1.94%.
Check that math.
1.96.
For our region.
There is a CPI, there's a regional
Oh,
CPI.
I
John,
just have
John, can you comment on that? You were
On the
that.
regional CPI?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't comment on
I
that.
thought you were on the subcommittee that was formed,
The Fiscal Sustainability Working Group?
working group, yes.
We haven't met in
No,
2
no, but
years.
I thought that you had identified a regional CPI in that working group. Maybe not.
No, we've looked for one, but we have not found one.
Okay.
I think whatever that number is, I think it might be helpful to just put it in the letter as far as,
Exactly. That's a great,
Okay.
and it's a
So our-
starting point. It's just a starting point.
All right, so we are,
You want to do it? You want to know what it
yeah,
is?
let's,
probably a little
So,
less than
the national CPI for the
Yep.
last 12 months was 1.6.
I thought the trailing 12 was 1.8, but
Well, I just looked it up.
We're using regional.
And 1.6
We're
for
using
like
regional though.
months.
I don't know how to get a regional.
And then the 10-year Treasury rate of yield was 1.96, right?
1.96, and you said
As
the
of
other
when?
one was
July
what?
3rd.
on July 3rd, it could have been. It's 2.808 now, but yeah.
It's okay,
The
1.96.
Northeast.
It changes.
the-
Oh, here he is.
So are you talking about the Northeast all items CPI is 1.6?
Okay,
For the
What is it?
period?
Northeast,
12 months.
all
Last
item.
12 months.
As of July 1st or as of today?
July
As
9th.
of
What-
actually,
July
as of
July
as of
1st.
June, this is a report as June 2019. So I would imagine this is the end of June.
Here's one
Yes.
July 11th. Same thing, 1.6.
Okay,
So the average of those, 1.6 and 1.96, is 1.78. And so you can round it up to 1.8, but that would be the number if we use those numbers.
And if I could just piggyback on what you were saying, Phil, I think it's actually a good suggestion that we actually do meet ahead of the meeting, town meeting, make the proposal. You know, it doesn't have to be, it's just here's an FYI for everyone. This is what we're going into the meeting with. This is what we propose. It lets everyone know where we are, it level sets the conversation, and then we can add that as a reminder in our letter on a going forward basis. So I think that's a,
And, you know, I think we're gonna
That's a
have
good
a
plan.
hearing where people can comment on it, but I think people benefit from knowing. These guys are proposing only a 1.8% increase. It's based on,
1.7.
I have no problem with this.
Yeah.
I have no problem with this number. It's what we voted. Could I get a motion to allow Mary and I to just work out the language of this clause in this letter? I don't want to have 15 people try to figure out the exact words if we can avoid that.
I make a
move.
motion.
I
I make a
I'm happy
motion
to.
for the chair and the guideline chair to, to develop a paragraph or a few sentences to describe the sustainability,
Sustainable growth rate.
sustainable growth rate for our town, based on the calculation of, and then it's right here on page 3.
I second.
Well, thank you for referring to that document. It took me a long time to pull
Really?
all those
She
little.
read it,
You know, she read it. So, okay.
One quick question. My concern would be that there may be some, I mean, there's going to be pushback, but without some kind of PR, getting the word out to the community about this number and the foundation behind the number, I think there needs to be a parallel effort at least to have either an article in the journal or just something that's going to let the town know that this is the number going into the budgeting cycle.
I'd be willing to work up a letter to the Journal that would be placed maybe first thing in September. I mean, to put it out in the middle of August would be something that people like, I'm not here, I'm on vacation, whatever, but would be in the paper like in the first week of September when everybody's back.
That's a great idea. That was on my list of new business.
Yeah, you know, so
Isn't this all also in the Finance Committee report that we provide?
I don't think
No.
we put this in last year's
wasn't.
report
It
because we
wasn't.
were
No.
You know what?
we were
Why
just
don't we
too.
put it online under the FinCom, and you could also reference the background information associated with this is available. Finance.
That is something that Carrie and I are, you know, exchanging emails about is where do our materials go? Like the things that we have in meetings, the, you know, things, the minutes are all available. There's a way to get to minutes. So you see the agenda item and then you can see the minutes in the calendar. But it's an open meeting law requirement that if you're reviewing materials at a meeting, those materials need to be archived so that they can be reviewed by others in the future. And I would love to see if we can make that be an online archive so people can go, what were the meeting materials for this meeting? The select board does it at the end of their agenda. There's a click through that says, here's our materials. We just need to figure out what they're doing, and Carrie and I will work with the IT director to figure something out. We're going to try to come up with something. So, working on that. Yeah.
I also wouldn't discount the Chamber of Commerce website. The posted articles.
Can you pull the microphone closer, Andrea? Thanks.
The Chamber of Commerce website posted articles under consideration before town meeting. This had never been done before, but last year there were it was posted. There were several articles, controversial articles, that were posted by people who are members of the chamber or organizations, and the response was pretty big.
Okay. So if
I
I put
think
something together, I'll be happy to send it to the
to the
chamber and
Journal.
ask them to post it and just say it's FinCom thing. You know.
In addition to the journal,
Yeah.
not everybody
Yeah,
reads the journal.
there's there's a somewhat moribund Yahoo group for Concord that, used to be very active. I don't know what happened to that, just seems to no longer be busy. But somehow we have to get the word out, and I'm happy to put something together indicating the motions that have been enacted by the FinCom, and this is what it is this year. So it's not hard to do. I can easily do that.
I think that's a good idea. And maybe as part of that letter, do we want to mention, preview that there's going to be a hearing coming up?
Yeah, well, that's the next question is when do that hearing's got to be after Christmas, after the new year somehow. Based on the calendar, we're already meeting on, I think that's just a stretch, so.
Well, would you ever consider having it sometime in September? Because when we have these meetings with the town, when we have the meetings with the school here about their budgets, we're going to be referencing it. And if people don't get the Concord Journal or the Patch,
Right. So,
it would be possible.
So we have September 26th, our regular meeting, and the 19th. So we could potentially schedule it, because you're now talking about sort of not preempting, but having this town hearing, this conversation, ahead of the guidelines process and into the budgeting process. So, if that's,
I think it's
would that be
important.
helpful?
I think that's important.
Okay, well, we'll look for something between Labor Day and the end of September. We'll look for something.
So then one other question. I wasn't here for but we didn't vote on it at town meeting, right?
No.
So was there a discussion of whether we should bring the formula to town meeting, and it was wasn't a good idea, or?
Yeah. The previous chair, the previous chair, Tom Tarpey's not here to defend himself, but he was very eager to have this policy or this process of creating a sustainable rate and using it as a forward-looking guidance process for the town be enshrined in some way so that the FinCom would be required to do this every year going forward. And so he crafted a warrant article that would say we're amending our bylaw to require ourselves to issue this. After a lot of back and forth, and there was some pushback within the town. There was some pushback. It was decided not to move the article. Now, I'm committed to it. We're going to try to go forward with it, but there are future chairs who may just say, oh, it's optional, I'm not doing that. So Tom was trying to make sure that we always will do it because we have caused the town to amend our bylaw or to do something, to agree to an article requiring us to do it.
So Dean, Tom actually originally proposed that we would bring the number to be debated at town meeting.
Oh, that didn't go over well here, not even
Anyways,
here.
that's how it evolved.
But what I could see is a formula enshrined in law, bylaws, right? And then.
Well, it's just a motion. It's not enshrined. It's a motion that we've made. This is how we'll do it. And to Tom's credit, he said that should be something that flexibly could be changed, that the committee could vote to, let's say we use that for 2 years, and then we decide, that's not really a very instructive thing. Let's use a different approach, or let's think of other, we vote a different method.
Having something go to the town meeting could actually help sort of endorse what we're doing and just build a little support so it becomes institutionalized. That's all.
I think one of the arguments for not going to town meeting is that we can publish a guideline whether it's in the bylaws or not. We have that. We can do that. So why constrict ourselves by making it something like that? And exactly what we're thinking of doing tonight. I think the purpose of the hearings, and I think the purpose of putting this in the letter, is really to start the conversation. It's not hey, stay within this guideline. It's really to start the conversation about are you aware of the fact that this is what inflation is, and yet we are outstripping it, continually. So I think I really hope that it doesn't devolve into what should the number be, and because it could, and I hope it stays into more of a conversation about, are people okay with that? Are people okay with spending more than the guide? Of course, we're going to spend more than this guideline. I just said that. Because we are.
All right, yes,
Yeah,
go
one more
ahead,
comment.
Greg.
Back on the numbers. I don't have the document in front of me, but does it list where we get it from? Because three of us looked in different places.
It did specifically say in here, the most recent 12-month CPI for our region. Okay, that's one. The sustainable rate of taxation growth should be a component.
Are these on a link on a webpage like you
Well,
just
I
found?
went to Bureau of Labor Statistics, so.
Yeah, so can we just stamp it with that so we can just look, right?
I just Googled the two numbers.
Right, exactly.
But the 10-year Treasury bill is as of the first day of July, so I would think we'd try to get it for the two of them would be as close to the first day of July as possible.
Agreed, but this came from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, right? So we didn't have to Google it when we were looking for it, right?
Yeah, actually, now that you mentioned it is as of the first day of July. Mine was July 3rd. There was an auction on July 3rd.
But July 1st was
July
a
1st,
Monday, wasn't it?
yeah.
Or a Saturday?
But actually, it should be the one that John came up with, because that would have been the one in effect on July
But
1st.
yours was national, though, wasn't it?
The CPI is
Hence my
national.
comment, right?
But Brian came up with a regional one.
But
He came up with the Northeast.
Right, so the BLS breaks them down by region, so I just looked at the
Can we ask
BLS.
Carrie
And so
to-
I think we should just understand and be able to we should have sourcing a footnote, just so
Yeah,
people
that's
are
easy.
But to answer Greg's question, there'll be no question because we're talking about a specific time frame and a specific date. So there'll be no question as to what the numbers are.
Somebody else thought maybe we should be asking Carrie if you have
Yes.
any thoughts on these two numbers that we're going to take an average of.
Oh,
The sources of them.
Well, there are, there's two official
Carrie's
sources.
like, really?
Really? Like, really, you're gonna issue
Really?
this?
You want to ask me
All
this
right,
question?
we're gonna,
Really?
I think
Okay, so you're going to footnote the sources.
we'll make sure that
It's
it's identified.
It's just a number.
Yeah, it's just a
It's just a
number.
number.
Could we change it to the 1-year yield? I take the
I know, exactly, exactly. This inverted yield curve thing, yeah, exactly. Okay. All right, I think that we have spent a fair amount of time, but I think we have an idea that there had been no vote on Dee's, I believe, you proposed that Mary and I craft a paragraph.
Oh,
there
I
a
second
second?
that.
That was seconded.
Yeah.
We need a vote. All in favor? It's unanimous. Okay, Mary and I will work on some language there. Okay, so the next one is really a John thing. We talked about it the last time, which is the Middle School Stabilization Fund. And I think this year we should probably have some kind of FinCom conversation or recommendation around how we deploy free cash in the anticipation of a new middle school and what we do with it, whether we take it and cuff it aside and put it into a stabilization fund, what we do to try to anticipate the availability of surplus land and buildings, whether you can somehow get ahead of that and make those funds available for the actual construction, or what we do with that. So do you have any further thoughts on this, John?
Well,
I don't really
no.
have any go forward idea other than that I would like to see the budgeting process include some set asides for what we know is coming down the tracks.
So Mary, in the CPS guideline letter
Yeah.
under capital assets, you actually make reference to potential disposition plan.
Yes, I did. You asked me to do that.
Yeah. Which, and thank you for including that. So I assume that's a reference to this
Right.
to a related topic. It occurred to me after the meeting last time that I don't know, is this the kind of thing that the FinCom would vote on or show some sort of measure of interest or support in continuing to pursue or not, I guess, was my first thought. And
So one of the things.
the second thought was, what's the next step? Because we can debate it, a lot, but unless we make the appropriate, next steps to further the discussion, obviously it's not going anywhere.
I guess one of the things that would be helpful is if the school committees were conducting, or perhaps the select board were conducting, a parallel track conversation about what happens with that building. We don't like go all the way down the road of building a new building and go, oh, look, we have a free building. We haven't thought about that. So we should probably have some sort of parallel process that's going on to determine the disposition of that. Mike, would you like to comment on how that might play out in the town?
With no detail, but certainly those conversations are already taking place.
Okay.
John, can you, as a new member here, can you define what do you mean by a stabilization fund?
Okay. So at the meeting that we had in the hearing room, at our last meeting, it was really just the thought that when the Peabody property becomes available and is surplus to the school's requirements, that it could possibly be the basis for a kind of middle school debt stabilization fund, based on some factor of monetizing that property. And there are many options, and ranging from an outright sale to some sort of development that could or could not include things like affordable housing and achieve other town goals. So that's really the extent to which, I discussed it in the last meeting.
So as an offset to the capital project, or whatever the capital budget is, there's some offset that was potentially in the value of that property.
Yeah, so just,
You should explain a little bit what a stabilization fund is.
Yeah.
maybe Kerry should explain what a state. No, it would really just be a source of funds dedicated to offsetting some of the interest costs of a new middle school, over some appropriate period.
It comes out of free cash.
Yeah, and I'll do my best to just define what a stabilization fund is. A stabilization fund is an account that's established frequently through town meeting for a specific purpose. And when funds are placed in that, they can only be extracted to meet the purpose as identified. So a stabilization fund might be for tax mitigation of the middle school building project. And then you could take money out to try to defer, to deflect the interest, the debt service, or for whatever purpose. Usually they're for tax reduction, just to cut the peak off of debt spikes when so you put money aside into such a fund, and then you have it available for the purpose going forward. We have stabilization funds that have been established for technology purposes, for the school systems or for the town. And then they can take it out for the purposes of building infrastructure like our broadband, for example, when they need it. So, they're just special accounts that are established. Money is taken from a general fund and placed in these specialized fund accounts for a purpose.
Yeah, good explanation. And my guess is this would be received very favorably by Moody's and a rating agency, but I don't actually know that for a fact.
So are we considering a stabilization fund for debt service and or remediation of the land, or both, or?
Usually those are just tax stabilization funds are, I think that's how Tony Galbo used to set them up. You're putting money aside in order to mitigate taxes in the future.
But you said that they can only be taken out for a specific reason, so we would have to be specific, whether it's debt service on the new middle school or whether it's remediation.
Maybe
on
Carrie
the
can give
land,
us some insight
right?
on how that would work.
This guy's ridiculous.
So it certainly would be a good idea that if you have specific intentions,
Yep.
that those are specified so that we don't get into a situation like we did with the Emergency Services Stabilization Fund, where people had different ideas on what those funds would be
Good
used
point.
and how they would be used. But we haven't created a stabilization fund since I've been here, but my assumption was that when the high school stabilization fund was created, that there was some sort of agreement on the amount of money that would be taken out each year and for how many years, because we certainly had a plan, a schedule of what would we
Right.
be taken out each year. So
There
we
were
would
like $2
expect to
million
do.
withdrawals for several years, and then it sort of tailed
But
off.
it was specified
specified.
when it was set up. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
The one thing, I'm not sure I heard, stabilization fund can only be taken out with a vote of town meeting. I'm not
Okay,
sure
sorry.
I
Yeah,
heard
okay,
that,
maybe-
so it's
sorry,
not,
yeah.
it's not town meeting sets it up and then either the school committee or the town manager or select board can take it out. It has to go back to town meeting for an approval to remove those funds, even for the purpose for which it was established.
Question around this. Because it's being pulled from free cash, there would be a determination on how much cash up front, correct? And if so, how do we make that calculation? How does that calculation typically made, especially in this context?
It's really not our call, Brian, but I think that, we would get a recommendation from Carrie or, the town manager would somehow put it in the budget, that our budget would say, this is what we're doing with free cash. We can suggest, we're just advisory. And that's their thing, but,
So can you add to this stabilization fund over a period of time?
yes.
You can add to it and then you can remove from it at any time also, or?
Yes, with votes of town
With the
meeting.
vote, okay.
Okay.
That's
That's with a vote or at a special town meeting if it needed
Yep.
to,
Right.
then money needed to be used. But I want to go back to John. John, were you looking at this as a reduction in the debt? Like to smooth out that, or were you looking at it for the use of the property itself, or?
To reduce the impact of the debt servicing impact of the bonds that would have to be issued for the building of the middle school. Have the new members seen the guesstimate that Kerry has done on the impact of the median household tax bill as a result of all of the town's projected capital building, requirements, including middle schools? Because that was really the genesis for the idea. Okay. It's a big ask, and we all want, a great middle school. And this is one slightly different way of potentially softening the impact to the average taxpayer by monetizing in some fashion the property.
Okay, so it's not
to
really-
reduce the impact of the debt servicing on the
so
on the
it's
tax
not
bill.
for use in anything associated with how the Peabody building is going to be used, or the property is going to be used. It has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with just the debt servicing of the new middle school.
Well, when you say monetizing the existing.
So the use of the property would be what town meeting and the select board and the school committee decide it should be.
No, I know, but these funds could not be used for that unless we specified that.
These funds could not be
Is that
used.
correct?
it's got to be used for a very specific purpose.
I think practically what you're talking about, give an example. Take the Peabody School, sell it, you get $4 million. Take the $4 million, put it into this fund, so that over the next 5 years, you can withdraw it to help basically tamp down the tax increase that you get as a result of.
So that's the simplest example, except that I had heard a $10 million valuation put on the property. And also the residual is that, say, theoretically you were to build, some number of houses, including affordable housing, and put these properties back on the tax rolls, it would continue to contribute going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, but under your scenario, none of that money could be used to build those affordable houses.
No.
Is that correct?
No.
Unless we specified that.
I don't think
It would have
so.
to be specified.
It'd have
It
to be
would have to be
specified.
specified.
Yeah, so that's why a parallel track conversation about the disposition of that property really needs to be undertaken.
So I think we're talking about two different things. One is a stabilization fund for the debt service that might come out of free cash. Another possibility could be a stabilization fund that's funded by the disposition of the property that's used for remediation or whatever else the town wants to do with that. Is that what, we're talking about two different things? Because, at least that's the way I'm understanding it, because we're not going to sell the property until we've actually built the school.
Well,
There's a timing issue.
Right, but we're still gonna have debt spikes after the school is up and running. We're gonna
Okay.
have, the taxes are gonna get going.
I think it's that first blip, though,
Yeah,
that
that
I
is the
think,
most
I think,
serious.
I personally would, I mean, one of the things I'd like to propose is that we have a stabilization fund to kind of smooth out that first
That
blip.
first one, yeah.
That first huge bump.
Yep.
And
I-
that would be, your vanilla debt stabilization fund.
Yeah, you look
This
at your
other
free
thing is
cash,
much more
you,
innovative.
you,
And I
Which other thing?
the thing, in my mind, I'm separating out another stabilization fund, which would be used by the sale of the property, and that fund would be used for remediation or whatever else needs to be done with that property.
I hadn't considered that at all.
Oh, well, I just made that up.
No, well, maybe it should. That might be what town meeting decides. Okay, but that wasn't what I was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just made that
But
up.
I hear what you're saying,
Yep.
because we could use free cash for the debt servicing, to bring that down.
Right, and I think we should. I mean, we keep hearing we have a lot of free cash.
Right.
And we have a huge
So
debt.
you could, and we can't do it, you can't even construct one if you sell that property, you won't even have it available. You won't even have the cash available until
Right.
the sale. So that wouldn't have to start now, but a stabilization fund for the construction of the new school, we could actually start that now.
Yes. Or at the next town meeting.
yep, go ahead, Brian.
Carrie, just one final question for you. So with these stabilization funds, let's just assume we get 10 million for this particular purpose. Does it sit in cash, or do we put this in a enhanced cash, or does it sit idle, or can we invest it? So it
It
doesn't
does
sit idle.
not sit idle. There are limitations on the investment of general funds. So we do have some ability to invest, and we do invest to the fullest extent that's
Okay,
available.
that's all I wanted to know. Thank you.
So if you read the charge of the new Concord Middle School Building Committee, there's numerous references to all financial issues. So this may be something that they may have some input on.
So, well, John, would it help to have the FinCom move or approve a motion to recommend the establishment of the middle school stabilization fund?
I think yes, or at least ask whether this is considered, a feasible.
So
I mean, it's a little different. Although I understand that at the state level, the governor is taking some of the proceeds from the sale of the General Electric headquarters downtown and devoting that to affordable housing. So I don't think it's unprecedented, but it's not sort of standard. But yes, is the answer to the next step, whatever the next step is considered.
Just to move
But
this
wait,
along.
are we talking about debt stabilization? Sorry. I'll be quiet.
I was just gonna move this along. We've had a discussion. I move that we recommend to the select board and to I guess it would be the middle school building committee, that they consider the establishment of a middle school stabilization fund. And that, that the chair be directed to submit that or send that a letter with that recommendation to those entities.
Do we have a second for
Can I
that?
just, I agree with that, but do we, so that's the mechanism? Do we want to talk about the source of what happens with the proceeds going into that, right? Because that seems to be
Yes.
I
the
think
linkage that
It's
John's
a
trying to
debt
establish.
stabilization, right?
Well, here, my thinking is we start the ball by just suggesting it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the source issue, that could kill the whole thing, because then we're gonna get into nitpicking about what's gonna happen with right now. So let's just suggest that it be established.
What do you mean,
and,
Phil?
And then there could be a debate about what's gonna be used to fund it.
What do you mean it would get? I didn't understand what you meant by it could get into.
Well, so if we say you should use the proceeds from the sale of the Peabody property to fund the middle school stabilization fund, somebody should say, no, we should use the proceeds from that to build affordable housing. And somebody else should say, no, we should use that to
Well, they're
buy,
not mutually
something
exclusive, though.
else.
So
Why do we have to specify that at all? Why can't, when you made your motion, It was to establish a middle school stabilization fund.
Without
And if-
specifying how it's going to be funded.
Well, I guess, all right, so along that line, I think that a couple of thoughts that were going on here. I would think that it could be a stabilization fund for debt services and start it with free cash. Because we won't, otherwise, we don't need to say anything for another 3 years or so until there's money from the.
I think
This
that can
is-
be
this is
decided
a-
after the fund is started.
This is a normal use of free cash, so this should be,
What's going to happen is if we specify anything about it, having to do with the sale of the Peabody thing, the public's going to take away. FinCom wants to sell the Peabody school.
No, I'm not even saying that. It's just, all you want to do is establish a stabilization fund for debt service on the construction of the new building, the new middle school.
Okay, yeah, for the construction, that's the
And
point,
it
yeah.
would be funded through free cash.
yes.
Not exclusively, but it could be funded through free cash.
So in the coming town meeting, we would need two motions, I think. One would be to establish it, and the other would be to move free cash into it. It might be that those two clauses can exist in the same motion, in the same warrant article, I'm not sure, but that's what we'd want to do. It's like to just, let's put some seed money in there, and we'll think about this in future years, how much free cash we have, how much we can put aside, but, you know. that
My
seems-
motion wasn't to.
Your
specify-
motion was for me to just write a letter and have the thing established.
Decide at
Yeah.
some future date, we may move
Yeah,
it
it's fine.
next month to
fine.
add free cash to the. or
This is a
put-
simple
use free
matter.
cash. But I didn't think we should at this point specify how we're going to fund it.
Just a clarification, the specific purpose of the fund, because it has to have a specific purpose,
Yes.
is to be used to service the debt, to be used to offset the.
To mitigate the taxes which are caused by the construction of the new middle school.
The debt.
It's fungible. It's just money. Once it all comes down to the bottom line, you're going to have to take this much, you're going to have to extract this much from the taxpayer, and we're going to say, here, we're taking this much out of this fund, and we're going to mitigate the tax burden. So it's a kind of, I think we can come up with some generic language. It doesn't have to say debt service or anything else, because, you know, it's fungible. It's just money. We're trying to mitigate the tax burden associated with the construction of the middle school.
And knowing how much free cash, do we have a target for what that mitigation is going to be? I mean,
Future discussion.
That could be a future discussion. Tonight, we're just talking about encouraging the select board to
so
offer.
essentially planting a seed.
Yeah, yeah, plenty of seeds.
It's a concept.
It's fine.
It's a concept.
That's fine.
They don't even have
And the
a
concept-
feasibility study done yet, so they didn't know the cost associated with the construction.
I
So
know.
then that would be,
They may come back and say, oh, we decided we need a new middle school after all. That's the whole point of the feasibility study.
Yeah, there's a lot more information that would be required.
I would
Clearly.
second Phil's motion. I agree with your explanation of separating it, letting know why it makes sense.
Yeah.
Not to ask about the source or.
So we're just trying to establish a stabilization fund for the purposes of mitigating, you know, future taxes and, you know, associated with the middle school. And, you know, TBD. It's fine. I will put something together.
does it have to be?
Wait, we need a vote. We need a
I know,
vote.
but does it,
Yeah,
under
right.
discussion,
Oh.
does it have to be associated with the middle school? Construction of the middle school? It's not just a general stabilization fund, is
No,
it?
I think it would be.
We wanted,
Yeah, it would be, like if we were to put money in this year and then next year, we probably couldn't vote to take it out because we hadn't incurred any debt yet. So it'd probably, you know, we'd probably say that's not meaningful, we can't take it out.
it's for the purpose of the
It is for the
construction
purposes of the construction,
It's
to
not
mitigate,
just open-ended.
to mitigate the impact, the tax impact of the construction of the middle school. I think that's probably about as general as you can get.
Yeah, I think we'll tighten it up as we move along.
Yeah.
But for now, it's a start. But it
Okay.
should be
I
tightened
got
up.
two to-dos.
So, are we going to vote?
Yeah, we need a vote. All in favor of having me write such a
Get a
letter?
second?
I guess I'll say, yeah, whatever.
Okay.
Andrew, you're looking very cool with those sunglasses, I have to say.
Yeah, really.
The lights a little sky.
Okay, where are we on my, I gotta go to the.
Correspondence.
Chair's report.
Correspondence, we did have one letter from a citizen. Kevin Park sent us a letter. It is not in the packet. It was forwarded to everyone. His concerns are, those that have been expressed, I think, as well here at the FinCom, which is the concern about the ongoing expense of legal services associated mostly with our fight over Estabrook Woods. It
I
is.
thought he had a great proposal in there, though.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
I thought so too.
You
Yeah,
know?
yeah.
That should, I read it as it should be included in the town manager's budget, the full,
In
the town manager's budget proposal.
I think that's terrific.
Right.
Do you want to, I have it in front of me. Do you have it in front of you that you
No, I
want to read
don't.
it to
I
everybody?
don't have it in front of me. You want to read it, Dee?
His recommendation, his suggestion, is just the following. The town manager and the Board of Selectmen should ask their legal counsel for a range of financial estimates regarding the ongoing case, which is Estabrook Woods. That range of estimates combined with probabilities should be presented to the Finance Committee and incorporated into the fiscal 2020 and 2021 town budgets. These costs are easily anticipated. The citizens of Concord should not be surprised by the spending after they occur. So, and then he goes on and he says, the strategy and rationale behind the legal effort is the responsibility of the town manager and the select board. However, the integrity and transparency of the cost should be the responsibility of the finance committee.
And we were drawn into the problem in that we were taking emergency funds for a less than emergency purpose. It's not an emergency when you have ongoing litigation,
So,
Can you read the last comment, though? That made me a little nervous. What did he just?
What
He
did,
says, I understand the strategy and rationale behind the legal effort in the responsibility of the town manager and the select board. Period. However, the integrity and transparency of the cost should be the responsibility of the finance committee. And this was in direct comment to the questions at our last meeting when we
Right.
were talking about the $100,000 voted on.
it was 225,000.
The transfer-
It was
No, but-
225,000.
But then this other.
Oh, yes, yes.
I think this is a good suggestion, but I think it reflects a misunderstanding of the roles.
Yeah.
I think he thinks we know
Right.
what the select board is doing
Right.
with this lawsuit.
Right.
We don't. We know after the fact. They said, "Oh, we just spent $350,000."
That's why he suggests this other up here.
Yeah, I know, but when he says the transparency is the function of FinCom, it's not right now. We find
Well,
out after the fact what they've done.
that's a good
And the
point.
select board says, "Well, we didn't know how much it was going to cost."
Yeah, that's a good point.
So actually, maybe what we should do is put his question, which is well articulated, about the expected costs and budgets and so on, into the guideline.
Well, we do ask for legal expenses. Please discuss your current thoughts about ongoing legal expenses facing the town and their impact on spending. So there's,
Okay, maybe.
We're
is there
asked-
anything-
we- we're at-
The
we've
only-
asked
The
for it.
only thing he has in here, it's that range of estimates combined with probabilities should be presented to the finance committee and incorporated into fiscal 2020.
Is anyone other than FinCom members CC'd on this letter? Was this?
It was also, I believe it also went to, up here. Finance director, no, that came from Carrie. You know what, it was on Carrie.
Carrie got it and sent it to us, yeah.
I didn't copy that on here, from Kevin to the finance committee.
Okay, so
But I thought
so
that-
so the select board they were not CC'd, or it doesn't appear as though they were. Or were you in receipt of this, Mike? No? Okay.
Can you forward it along to that?
Yeah, it's emailed, we can forward it.
Sure.
So, Mary, how about just adding this language as a parenthetical or, a clause in your question about the legal expenses that they asked for, including the range of estimates combined with probabilities for any litigation, any known litigation. And you could ask that to all three entities.
Sure, that's a generic.
Yeah.
You know, to Parashar's point, we don't want to get too prescriptive about these things, you know.
Yeah.
So you're down in the weeds here, but it's valid. It is
It
a
might trigger
Yeah.
asking for it. You know, I know that I know that Chris Whalen knew how to ask for a budget, but I'm a lawyer. I get asked for budgets all the time. It's a bane of my existence. I hate giving budgets because when you blow the budget, the client says, "You told me it was only going to cost this," but we do it all the time. And I don't know if one was asked for here. If one was asked for, we should have known that we're going to spend $350,000.
I think that we can ask that question when we're in conversation with them.
But by that time they say, "Oh well, I haven't."
Well,
had a
then
chance
when
to
they
ask."
come back, because they come back, right? They come back. I think it's
we
really.
do have a follow-up letter.
We do have a follow-up
that goes
letter.
out beyond the.
We have a follow-up
between
conversation
the
with them. I think it's really up to us to make sure that we manage that conversation.
I get asked for a budget every day, so
Well,
I think that if the town manager sees that, say, "Okay, I'm just going to call the lawyers and ask them for a budget," and I'll give that to them.
well, we've asked for that before, actually. Remember when Grace was here on our? Remember when Grace was on our?
Yeah.
We've asked for that before, so I think it's really up to us to. Again, I'm hoping during the conversation that we can really be insistent upon. Can you get us those numbers?
Just to go
I don't know.
back-
I'll leave this up to other people whether they think we should include this or the sentence that's here is good enough.
Well, maybe we should see what they present to begin with, right? I mean, and then go back and ask for, is this the only estimate you have? Or should we ask them for a range of estimates?
I'll let other people decide.
Well,
You know, the probabilities.
Didn't Grace say it was gonna, she said it's gonna cost 2, 3, 4 times whatever number they had.
And
She
Grace.
told us that.
Oh, yeah.
last year.
And Grace also said it was, she was an attorney, I think she was a partner, and that you can put together estimates, because we were hearing,
Well, then
we
we
don't
should
know.
ask for that then, and, you know, what the likelihood is or probability is of each
But I-
different
I
estimate.
would say that history has borne out that she was correct in what she said.
There have been multiple attorneys in town who have commented that we are looking at some very high numbers, and it's not a unique.
So Phil, do you want to make a motion and see if people?
I have a question. Just curious. Was the implication in the last sentence that the finance committee is not transparent?
No,
No.
no.
Just that we're the ones that are overseeing legal expenses, I guess is supposed to.
We're responsible for transparency.
Right, but
I think-
what made me a little nervous about that is whatever we approve, we're on the hook for, and so the idea that we actually know what that number is going to be just doesn't. We're not lawyers.
Yeah,
We don't.
Well, and we don't know, like, we don't know when the expenses are incurred, what the number is going to be. We find out after the fact.
We did.
Oh, we spent
Right,
$350,000, but we need to know in advance if there's an estimate. So yeah, I move that we
Yeah.
amend the question about legal expenses to the town, at least, to add a request for including the range of estimates, financial estimates, combined with probabilities for any known litigation.
Second.
Any further discussion?
The only further discussion is, it was only sent to finance mail,
Finance mail.
so
Okay.
that's how Carrie got it, and then
Right.
it was
Just a
distributed to us.
reminder, I think, I wasn't on FinCom, but FinCom, I think was updated periodically, Carrie, last year, so it shouldn't have been a total surprise to us.
Well, it was.
Sorry?
It was.
I don't think the issue is it was necessarily a total surprise. I do recall there was a conversation that we had during one of our regular meetings, and we were talking about the magnitude of the number and the request ahead of the emergency session.
Right.
And we had a dialogue with the select board observer at the time, and I think he had made, sort of the case for we being the select board and the town of Concord, don't exactly know what we're going to need to spend on this. And the idea is that we are entrusting the judgment of the select board to make a determination on whether or not we want to continue down this road. And it was an open item, which in hindsight, that wasn't necessarily the best approach.
It wasn't an open item at the town meeting?
No.
Special town meeting?
After town meeting.
After, but the issue I think now is that we are confronted with these ongoing increases that are of such a magnitude that we can't. This is not sustainable. It's not even rational on some level, because I don't think we have 100% buy-in anyway. And so this idea that we actually come up with, or at least we force the conversation and consideration of a budget, is actually a good thing. And that's the reason why I think this new language that we add really just explicitly says, listen, we want you to think about this. And
I think
I think asking for the way for legal costs, incorporating it in is a no-brainer. Just the tone, I get the sense some people think we're surprised by it. And so we should just let the record stand, as you said, Bob. There was some conversation, maybe the approach wasn't the right approach, and we should modify it moving forward.
I think we're ready to go forward now.
The
and
better
say,
way
what
to
do we
think
do
about
going
this is
forward?
it continues to be jarring.
Okay, so going forward, how do we improve it so that we get information?
Was the 350 number from the budget last year?
No,
No.
That wasn't.
no. The special town meeting, Chris Whalen stood up and wanted $100,000, and the town voted to approve that. And then we were asked last month to transfer from our reserve fund an additional $225,000. And that's
Okay, thank you.
In addition to that.
but going
Right.
forward,
In addition to what was requested
Going-
at town meeting,
moving
from town meeting.
forward, we'd like to know ahead of time or have a little.
Absolutely.
I believe I like the word transparency. If we can help by asking the right questions,
Right.
and add transparency to the process.
And through our transparency, that's how the author of this, Kevin Park, that's how Kevin Park learned about it, because he wasn't in attendance at our
No.
meeting that I'm aware of.
Nope.
You might have watched the video.
Yeah, that's just it. So we're,
All good.
It's
the
all
public
good.
has an opportunity.
Yeah.
We can vote.
Yeah. Can we
I think Carrie
can we
has
vote
something
to?
to say.
Oh yeah. Okay, Carrie.
I think the only thing that I wanted to say is, obviously, it's been duly noted that the Finance Committee is not in support of using the reserve fund as a mechanism to fund future legal costs, at least related to this lawsuit. So to the extent that the existing appropriation for fiscal 20 is not sufficient, I think you would like any overage dealt with in a different manner. So we have noted that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But I think what this does is actually, we say, any additional cost for this lawsuit should be built into the budget if it's known. And it can be, estimates can be provided so that we build into
The
it.
funny thing is this letter is going to look at FY21, and we've
Yes,
got
I
a
know.
problem in FY20, is
Yes,
what
we
Carrie's,
do.
Right,
Yeah.
is what I
what
was
Carrie's
just
on top of.
going to say,
Right.
that
Yeah. Okay.
we'd likely have
I-
an issue to deal with.
I think we're ready for a vote on just extending this language in the letter to include the clause, more or less as written by Kevin Park. All in favor? Okay. Looks like a unanimous vote. All opposed. Opposed. 2. Okay, 2 opposed.
Okay,
It's going in.
put it in.
All right, put it in. Okay, well, that does it for correspondence, I believe.
Could we add, since we don't have a separate line item for Estabrook Woods in this upcoming year, in our legal services item number, whatever it is on your list, could there be a sub note on that so that we could track Estabrook Woods?
Again, I think that's getting very prescriptive. I think this will flesh it out.
But they were very prescriptive in asking $100,000 for Estabrook Woods.
But that was,
At town meeting.
right, that was a specific article though, right? So are you saying you want this?
No, just in
Oh.
in the tracking of our financial list that we're gonna get to in another minute or two, we have 32 items on there, and we can't, wherever the page is.
Yes, I see, yeah, go
Okay?
ahead. Yeah, what are you
And
saying?
I'm just saying, I'm just suggesting that maybe it's a good idea to understand what the full amount is for Estabrook Woods, and not to have a separate line item for it, but have it broken out as a sub-item.
We can certainly ask that question because they will come to us and give us their total legal, and we can ask that question during the conversation as far as out of what you're
Oh, great.
requesting.
All right.
What you're requesting for legal, please,
Okay.
how much of,
Okay.
if we remember.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay. Chair's report. All right, I attended the Select Board meeting, and there was another round of conversations about the capital planning, long-range planning entity. It may be a temporary item where they establish a process, and then that process, and then that team or task force dissolves, and the process is handled by existing budgeting entities. That's a possible scenario, is that they say, okay, schools, you have to give us your 10-year plan, and town, you've got to come up with your 10-year plan, and the select board does the work of building and annually reviewing that 10-year plan. And in an alternative, it may fan out that that's a lot of work for the select board to do, and they establish a standing committee to do that annual review and to constantly groom the 10-year long-range plan for capital improvements. That conversation continues, and another draft of the charge is being discussed. I went to the chair breakfast on the 17th. Few items there which are of interest. There's a tax fairness issue that's sort of rumbling around between us and the State House, where we're trying to align some of the things that the town has been doing to try to mitigate taxes on elderly and less well-off people. And there's this sort of cutting where if you're qualifying for certain circuit breaker savings from the state, that if you're getting stuff from us, it disqualifies you from the state programs. So they're trying to harmonize those, and that's a lot of work for the Tax Fairness Committee. An interesting thing that came up at that chair breakfast is that the Personnel Board is having an identity crisis. They are pretty much, seeing themselves as a rubber stamp for the HR department of the town. The HR department of the town fully vets and understands what new positions need to be. They write the positions, they write the description of the positions, they study and return the information regarding what the salary ranges for those positions ought to be, and then the Personnel Board gets them and says, okay, thank you, and then they're done. So they're really trying to, sort of like introspectively think about what will the role of the Personnel Board be going forward, because it's also a very difficult board to staff. People don't necessarily say, hey, I really want to be a member of the Personnel Board. So that's, okay. On August 26th, the consultants who have been working on the facilities plan for the Select Board are coming in to give a talk. So if anybody wants to put that on their calendar, there's going to be the big facilities plan has been worked on. They have a draft that'll be presented. Let's see what else is going on. A few kind of off-the-cuff items. CBD oil is not allowed in food products. How about that? The health department has
Even brownies?
Nope. It's considered a medication. You can't put it in a food product.
Okay.
So there you go. It's considered a medication, even though you can buy it over the counter. Go figure. I guess you couldn't put aspirin in a food product either. So there you go. And there is a ruling in the I guess it's in the build, it really comes from the state building code, which is that if you establish a group home, this is considered a public building. This causes ADA problems and all kinds of real issues for group homes that are multi-person residences. They fall into all kinds of ADA issues because they've you could have, what's the name of the building on Walden Street, like Wheeler House, I think. I'm not sure that's very ADA-ish, but if it's a group home, all of a sudden, boing, you gotta step up. So it's this ruling from the inspectors is causing problems and they're trying to figure out what to do. State building inspectors saying that's the case. I'm not sure that that's true. I'm not sure that that's true. It may mean that you have to come into compliance. I'm not sure whether you can be grandfathered or it just. That's all. That's an interesting thing that's happening, and that's my report. So observer reports. We can start here.
I'll start. I went to the CPS meeting on July 16th. That's a great group of people. That sounds like a really fun job. You were on that, weren't you, Dee?
The CPC?
CPC.
Isn't that?
CPC. That's
anybody who rolls off next year, you should get onto the CPC.
Really,
It's
that's a great
it's really
group.
a good committee.
The good news apparently is John Kratzley, the current chair, said that the budget, that was the $43 billion budget that was just passed at the state level, apparently has more money for CPA. So I've asked Carrie to look into that and find out, how much. So that's really good news for them because the match has been going down, down, down. I think the match now is only 11%. So any additional funds would be a big help to them. The other thing they mentioned is that they don't have enough money for signs. You see the signs around town that this was funded by CPA. So they don't have enough money to build signs because people actually steal them.
What would you do with the CPA?
I know.
I'm thinking some of the little ones are metal, but the bigger ones, like there's one in front of the cemetery or on the gateway to the cemetery, or there should be on the
might be
gateway to
stolen.
the cemetery.
I don't know, 50 years from now, there'll be a barn sale and there'll be CPA from Concord signs. Anyway, they don't have enough money for signs, so right now they allocate $30,000 a year to admin expenses, so they're going to have to increase that budget to cover new signs.
Peter Bulkley building, we lost a sign there.
And that's all I got.
Who knew? Andrea is going to be our representative at the Council on Aging. So going forward, Andrea is going to be attending those. Dick, anything to say? Parshar?
Planning board, this past Tuesday. So the two major topics were the start of the library special permit and site plan review, because they've got the same recommendation on this one. There's nothing that touched FinCom specifically, but lots of concerns from neighbors about lighting, handicap spaces where there should be on the north side, on Main Street or the south side. There's some issues around that, food service, etc. So it was an interesting 2 hours. But the second part of the discussion that day was interesting because they talked about planned residential developments, and what they're trying to do is try to put additional incentives for additional units of PRDs. So the planning board sort of looked at the 3 village centers first to try to see if they ought to change the bylaws to incentivize more units within the PRDs by saying, hey, if you build more energy efficient buildings or whatever, we'll give you 2 extra units, etc. Ultimately decided not to touch the village PRD or develop special conditions there because they couldn't find any parcels that are left and that would be amenable to PRD. Kind of going like this, the 2 in this number. But they're also then going to look at the townwide PRD, so outside half a mile, 1 mile radius of the village centers, and to see if those incentives could work there. So, but then it went over, and so we stopped the meeting. But I did ask after the meeting whether they consider the impact of that on town services and finances, right? Because the more units you're adding, depending on what kind you're talking about, additional impact to schools and other places. And apparently, they shy away from doing those impact analyses because the appearance of discrimination, fair housing, etc. So they're gonna go ahead and maybe think about incentivizing the building of additional units
Right.
without necessarily thinking again about the long-term consequences.
Do they engage in any kind of like growth predictions where they sort of create any kind of an arc for what they think the housing stock would be in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? You know?
Not at the meeting, they may have. I'm setting up a separate conversation with Matt Johnson, just to get a little bit more context. It was my first meeting there, so I want to better understand sort of,
Okay.
you know, what those kinds of questions, where are the shortages, that sort of stuff.
Greg.
Nothing here.
Okay. Wade.
The rec meeting was canceled for July. So nothing here.
D.
Well, I have a kind of an interesting dilemma, which is that the committee that I was charged to look at and attend meetings to is maybe going to be a task force now. This is
There you
the
go.
long-range capital planning. So I had a couple questions along that line. Number one, can a member of FinCom serve on the task force? Because apparently, from when I was watching it on TV, the chair said, get people to put in their green cards to be on the task force. So I don't know the answer to that question. Maybe you can help me with that. I can't vote. I can't, you know, when you. So,
Yeah, we have a prohibition about being a member of another town committee. There was an early draft of that where they were going to use the word team, so that it was not a committee, and the FinCom member might be able to be a full participant on a team.
on the team.
And I don't know what that is.
But I think they're going to have a task force.
I think
That
it might
was
be
the
a
other
duck
word.
by any other name. So you
Well,
got to be, careful.
But I guess goes into question number two, which is if anybody else is interested in serving on that task force, they should put in their green card. Okay? And then my third one was, can a person observe a task force meeting? Is that the same as observing a committee
Yes,
or a
I
board
think that,
meeting?
yes, we had a task force. We had a task force for affordable housing funding.
Yeah.
Was that a committee or a task force?
No, that was a task
That was
force.
it was a short-term
Affordable
thing.
Housing Funding Committee. It was
Is
a
it
committee.
committee?
was a
Okay,
committee?
whatever.
Okay.
I don't know the distinction.
Well, maybe we can get the answer to that because I'd be happy
Yeah,
to
yeah.
observe the task force
Well,
committee.
our understanding was that you would be, a full-fledged member only, except you can't vote. That they really want a FinCom member to be at the table and fully participating. That's
Okay.
the goal.
Okay.
So just the fact that we can't, by our bylaw, we can't. Terry Ackman is, suggesting that we offer a warrant article this year that would knock that restriction away, but only for that one committee. But right now, we don't even know if it's a
If it's
long-term
gonna be a
committee.
committee.
So
maybe
we're in a little bit of
This
wild
will be
water.
continued
Yeah.
after their next meeting
Yeah,
or
when we
whenever.
Yep.
Okay.
But D could theoretically join the task force, put your green card in and join the task force if it continues as a task force.
I can do that without,
And then you could vote.
Yeah, yes and no. I'll tell you my experience. I was approached to be a member last year of like Susasco or whatever the Sudbury Assabet oversight thing, which is a multi community thing. And I asked Carmen, hey, this isn't really a Concord thing. Can I be a member of this? She said no. So,
Okay.
so I think it's unlikely we're going to get a yes, regardless of what we call it. I think it's.
okay.
just
So
think
I can
that's-
be an observer and that's
and-
fine.
and, yeah, you
Okay.
can be an observer, but you could sit right at the table and have a name card. You just can't vote.
Okay.
Anyway, Phil.
I got nothing.
Okay. John.
The Red Sox are beating the Yankees 12-2 in the fourth inning, I'd like to say. So I went to the tax relief meeting where those good people continue to try to find the most effective way to bring their benefits to the population that they serve. And so they're wrestling with a couple of issues, but are making progress with working with the assessor, all the time. And then I went to the first meeting of the new Concord Middle School Building Committee. I think because I'd gone to the public hearing, I just knew that it was going on, so I attended it. And that was the inaugural meeting. They're launched and they're on their way, and it looks like an amazing committee with great leadership and a lot of expertise and experience. And so they're planning to visit a number of schools, recently built schools. And my thought was to perhaps ask them to, in addition to touring the actual physical facility, to maybe come back with some financials as to how that was achieved, which might be kind of interesting benchmarking materials. The one thing that occurred to me was they seem to be moving really, really quickly. Presumably there are some deadlines they're trying to make that I'm not familiar with, but they're putting our new town manager in the position, I think, of having to make some decisions like his second day that he arrives. So I'm sure they'll give him plenty of background. And actually, judging from the Long Meadow debt profile on ClearGov, it looks like they built a school in 2012. So I'm sure he'll be up to speed very quickly. But they seem to be trying to move very quickly for some deadline purpose.
They want to get their OPM on board as fast as they can.
So, John, did they mention anything about going back to the state for money, or is that because I know that the new state budget has allocated a lot more money towards schools.
So one thing that's happened, Mary, and I mean others may know better than I, was that there's a lawsuit that's been filed by I think 7 towns against the state. 7 towns that are claiming they've been underserved for many years. Oh. And if there were a futures market in Concord getting any MSBA money, as soon as that lawsuit, I think we know.
Okay.
So that's just my sort of off the cuff interpretation.
Yeah,
I think their intention is to continue to pursue it.
Okay.
But my sense is the odds of that just took a.
Okay.
My understanding of the reason that money has been increased greatly is to fund what are called the foundation budget. So each school system establishes what's called a foundation budget, which the state approves and says, this is what you need in terms of money in order to deliver appropriate education. And on a foundation budget, if the town literally cannot fund it up to that level, the state fills that gap. And the funding that the state's been providing for years has been not really enough to meet all the town's foundation budgets.
I think that explains the Chapter 70 money, but I'm talking about the capital money.
There's capital money in addition?
Yes, they also increased the amount, but.
So just to clarify, the district did submit a statement of interest for this year. We'll hear in December.
Great, thank you.
The downside of that is if we were by any chance accepted into the process, we have to start all over again.
So the money spent on the feasibility schematic design would be sunk cost.
But you would hear by December, how far in is it going to, how far in are we going to be? We're going to have an OPM on board and, we're going to be early in the game.
Yes, correct. I would agree.
Yeah. Brian, any update?
The library committee met, but there was nothing that was germane to the finance committee. They are, just to echo Parshar's comments about talking about the new facility. There was some talk about handicap parking and access. And they talked about some scheduling, but.
Okay, thanks. So we don't have a report from any of the troika assigned to the school committee, so we just don't have that.
The other big issue is
Kirby?
parking.
Christine.
I don't know if that came up earlier, but the demand for parking.
Oh,
It's a bit like Avery. When they're asking for a waiver from the planning board, because they're not gonna have sufficient parking set aside for a building of that size. And so there's some discussion around, well, at some point,
It's supposed to be.
our town's gonna run out of parking. And I'm wondering if any of this has come up in any committees, and whether that's something that the town will have to think about, try to address 3 to 5 years from now.
But isn't that something that should be in the town's facilities management planning? Parking, or how to move people around, whether it's buses that they're gonna need or restricted areas. It's really a big question.
Yes.
In terms of how we're gonna be able to have use of facilities like the library for all the residents of the town and all the kids who go to schools in the nearby area when there isn't adequate parking. The CPC did look at the parking plan for affordable, for ADA compliance. And it's going to be on the Main Street side, and there are like 3 or 4 slots.
Might move it based on what happened.
Not on Main Street, but it'll be into.
The HDC is not thrilled with that.
Well, I don't know, but that was the schematic that was shown. But what does that do for, you try to find a parking space over in Emerson.
Oh, you can't. You cannot.
So I'm just wondering if that is something that is on Kate Hodges' list in terms of facilities management. It's not just the facility, but it's also the access with the facility or to the facility. It's like White Pond, it's Warner's Pond, it's the
I'm just
library.
curious, so if in fact the town decides to build a parking lot or do,
A garage.
Sorry?
Garage, sorry.
Garage or something, there is a potential, there's a financial impact.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just put that out there.
I have one piece of news
Yeah.
from my friends at Affordable Housing. Apparently Grantham, the developer at Junction Village, was not granted the tax credits, but they think they will get it next year, so they're hanging in there.
They don't.
So they didn't get it this year, they were
They
supposed
didn't
to
get
get
it this year. Yeah,
They didn't get it?
they
I
didn't-
did ask that question when they came before the CPC.
Yeah, they didn't
The
get it.
following, the year before, in terms of what happens if you don't get it.
Right.
And his response was, we'll go after it again.
They just
Yes.
keep reapplying.
So they're going to go after it again. Yep.
Okay, it's time for the finance director's report.
So I have one item for you this evening,
Oh,
and it is an
transfers.
update on the line item transfers to close out fiscal 19. We went through this at length at last month's meeting, and I gave you a preliminary look at where I thought we would be for closing out the year. Since that meeting, we've actually closed the year. I went to the select board on July 15th and presented them with 2 transfers, and I'm here to present those same 2 transfers to you this evening. There's nothing new, but a couple of things fell off as we were able to close out the year. So the 2 transfers this evening are for legal services and for Social Security and Medicare. So for legal services, when we met last month, I had included an estimate for June. We didn't have our June bill at the time. And I had included $40,000. And I believe after the reserve fund transfer, we still had about $4,000 or $5,000 deficit. And we got the actual June bills, both for general and for litigation. And that combined with that small deficit we had was $54,462.47. I had hoped that the June bills would be about $40,000, and they were higher than that. So the request is to transfer from town meeting appropriation line item 8, which is the finance department, and specifically from the treasurer collector's office, that amount to legal services to close out the remaining deficit in legal services. And I mentioned the reason that we have some excess appropriation in the finance department is we had a couple of vacancies. One of them was for about 3/4 of the year before we were able to find the right candidate. We also had a retirement, and we brought in a new person to a second position at a significantly lower salary. So we do have the funding available to cover that deficit.
I have a question, Carrie. First of all, thank you for finding that money. But this is for my education. Last month, when we did the reserve fund transfer, I thought I heard that you weren't able to transfer funds among line items on the budget. And yet, it sounds like this time we are transferring from the treasurer's up to legal. So how is this different than what I heard last time?
We are only able to transfer between line items under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 33B, between May 1st and July 15th. any other transfers that occur have to go to town meeting. And the reason that statute exists is most town meetings are over by the end of April, a couple of months before the fiscal year closes. So there is this special provision. So what I talked about at the last meeting was, well, we talked about both the reserve fund transfer and the proposal to make line item transfers under this particular statute.
So you can make line item transfers in this window of time.
Right, to close out the fiscal.
Okay, then I guess my follow-on question would be, why couldn't we have done that with like the big underspending we've got in public works, say? I'm just trying to understand.
To transfer.
Instead of the reserve fund transfer, why couldn't last month?
Well, I think the question came up, what happens if the finance committee says no to the reserve fund transfer?
Right.
I
and-
believe my answer was we would propose another line item transfer.
Okay, so,
Which we still have to approve,
right.
so.
Do we have to approve those line item transfers?
Yes.
Yes.
That's what we're doing tonight.
I think
Well,
maybe it was at the select board, they asked about that. I guess the hope is that the finance committee and select board would approve those. If you didn't approve them, and I haven't had any experience where committees have refused to approve them, then we would have a deficit closing the year. And what I think that the Department of Revenue would do is they would just ding our free cash instead of using the remaining appropriation. So it's going to get covered one way or another, and I think if the town
from free
would
cash.
choose not to do it, I think it would look very poorly, Department of Revenue would look very poorly upon the town, but I think they would just take it from free cash.
Follow up on Mary's question. So we could have last month, instead of use money from the reserve fund, just take it out of public works? Is that?
well, I'm asking, because,
No, that's what I got from your answer, Carrie.
Well, I would hope that you would take the recommendation that is coming from the town and not just
No, I
pick
understand
and
that.
choose.
So no, but the question is though, that if that option was available, I'm kind of curious what the rationale was to recommend from the reserve fund versus another department, that's all.
So the reserve fund is established in anticipation or as a reserve in the event that there are unforeseen or emergency expenses. And the way that I have always approached these things in the past is if this is unforeseen, that it would come from the reserve fund rather than another department. I mean, as you can see, we're still closing out $645,000 worth of appropriation.
So, Carrie, is there anything unique about the FinCom with respect to the reserve fund? That is, we're the ones who
Yes.
approve transfers from the reserve fund,
Yes,
but the select board and the FinCom approve line item transfers.
that's correct.
Okay, so by asking us to approve the big change from the reserve fund, that put it all on us for that legal expense. Whereas if it had been a line item transfer, it comes from a different pocket, but two different boards would have approved it.
Yes, I think between May 1st and July 15, we could also recommend that it come from the reserve fund through under Chapter 4433B. I think we could put that forward as a line item, even though it's the reserve fund that is under, because we're at the end of the year, we don't need it.
Well, a different question. What happens to the balances? Does that stay in the same line item in the next year? Does it go back to the general fund?
It will close out to the general fund and it will become part of the free cash calculation.
All of this becomes part of the free
Any
cash
overages,
flow?
yeah.
Yes,
the
So
net.
everybody starts at zero again the next.
yes.
so I just want to be, so the $225,000 transfer from the reserve fund, that did not require the select board approval. It was only the
It
FinCom?
was only the finance committee.
So what was the final total legal expenditure for the year? Not just the 400, but whatever else.
$629,462.47.
Okay.
And we budgeted 350, no, we budgeted 250 in the guideline and 100 at special town meeting.
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right, can we get a motion on these two transfers?
I just
Oh,
mentioned
you'll
the
have to
second one.
describe this, yeah, the social security one.
So-
Yep.
So then the second is a small request to transfer from line 31 town employee benefits to line 38 social security and Medicare in the amount of $1,962.35. And this is we have certain number of employees that are social security eligible, and we have to make an estimate about what we expect that payroll expense to be, and we're estimating that about 18 months in advance. These are part-time people, a lot recreation, and there is definitely some fluctuation, so a small deficit there as well.
So I move that we approve these transfers.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous. Okay, I think we are done here.
I
Can
move to adjourn.
Okay,
You need to ask any observers?
I'm sorry.
Oh,
Are there
oh,
any
sorry.
citizen comments? Okay, we're adjourned.